Hey guys, can you hear me okay? Just testing my mic. Yay! Hello, hello. Amy, Kayla, Karen, Lori, Sarah, Amy, Helen, Michelle, Marcus. Hey guys, how's it going? I know some of you have answered my question in the Facebook group about what stuff you guys are struggling around services, but I would love to hear from you guys, if you haven't answered the poll already, what part of designing your services is the biggest challenge for you guys right now? Some of the answers I put in there were knowing what to offer, knowing what your clients are willing to pay for, how to price your services, how to talk about what you do, writing proposals. And we can talk a little bit about writing proposals too, because I know that's come up quite a bit in the Facebook group. So I'd love to hear from you guys. And if there's something that you're struggling with that's not in that poll, feel free to post it in the sidebar, because I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper. And then if you guys are open to it too, I'd love to, pull you guys up on the air if you're open to showing your face, and we can actually kind of, brainstorm or jam on some ideas for you. So feel free to type it in the sidebar or answer the poll. Looks like knowing what to offer, knowing what your clients are willing to pay for are pretty high up on the list. How to package things up and set up retainers, especially I think maintenance retainers are something that a lot of you guys have been asking about. So like once the project finishes, where do you go from here? How can I find ways to continue that relationship and keep clients, keep a really nice long-term relationship and retainer going on. So packaging, knowing what clients are willing to pay for. And I'd love to know right now, what kind of services are you guys offering beyond straight up web design? So for those of you that are doing web design or are doing development, are you starting to already offer any services that actually go outside of the scope of design, whether you're charging for it or not? Coaching, perfect. Anyone doing like SEO work? I think we have like a UI person here, UX workshops. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of workshops you're doing, Amy. Like, are you talking within self-teach, or are you kind of helping teach clients about? Awesome. Yeah, Helen does content. So if content equals web design here, then coaching done with you content offers. Awesome. Thought about making it an extension of selfteach.me. Amazing. Yeah, Karen, I've been seeing you've been doing workshops on LinkedIn. Extended webinars. That's awesome. So do you guys feel like you're doing a little bit of client training, right? Writing, digital strategy, business process overviews. Sounds like a lot of you guys are already helping your clients do stuff way beyond the web design process. And do you guys feel like you've had trouble charging for those services? Do you kind of roll them up into what you're already doing? Have you been offering them as separate offerings? I'd love to know a little bit more about what's working for you guys. Separate things. Does anybody create a training library for their clients, like have a resource area? And or do you charge for that? Or have you been including that in your services? Not sure how to separate. Don't have a problem charging for it. Tell me a little bit more about your services, because you were mentioning in the Facebook group that you were struggling a little bit about what to offer, and you've got the vault of dead end roads, or at least I think they are. And I think you're sort of wondering how to either simplify your offerings, or if you're able to offer like kind of cut and dry productized services. Very ad hoc, don't have a livable income all 12 months of the year. And I think that's, Lori, I'm not sure if this is the case with you, but when you offer these sort of wham bam, like one-time short web design offerings, obviously it means you need more of those in the pipeline in order to maintain a livable income, right? So your pipeline, you might have like a pipeline problem, right, if your projects are a lot smaller. Public resources area on your site. Cool. And I'd love to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the tools that I've been using as well to help me do some of this brainstorming. I'm just going to make sure I've got the screen share. screen share extension going. So Kayla says, yeah, right now I want to customize everything, and I've been testing out what kind of strategy I want to do and am good at. Now that I'm clear on that, I'm at a loss for how to offer your services. So a lot of your work is really like custom coded projects. Want to get better at getting people onto maintenance retainers. Right now I do a lot of post-paid work and want to move to prepaid. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to retainers, you definitely want to do prepaid. So people are kind of like pre-booking those hours for you. Are we sharing me? We can share you, Kayla. Laura says, kicking around the idea of getting a flat fee from X number of clients, sustainable minimum income for a year, and just being on tap for a stable of clients and extra work on top of that. Type slow. So how many of you feel like knowing what you should offer is kind of a big struggle right now, or is it more how to price it or how to package it? And have you guys heard of the job to be done framework? Let me know if you're familiar with that. Knowing what to offer is a problem. Cool. Okay, let me share my screen here. There's a recent course I might have told you guys that I've been taking, design thinking and innovation. There's some really great stuff around how to innovate with any design thinking problem, any human-centered challenge. And I do think designing your services is a human-centered problem. So the jobs to be done framework is a really simple way of helping you get out of what do customers want and into what do they want their purchases to do for them. So, people aren't actually, they're not really looking for a website at the end of the day. The website is the tool to help them do a specific job, right? So let me show you, I'll share my screen and I'll show you what I did for one of my clients. There we go. Can you guys see that okay? It's called Job to be Done. And you can, it's like, I think it's pretty in line with the lean startup methodology too. So if you haven't heard of it, you can Google it, and there's tons of examples online. But so here's an example of one that I did for my client Willow, the end of life planning company. So with any project, there's a functional job to be done and an emotional job to be done. So especially in the case of something like end of life planning, sure, there's like the will and estate planning side of things, but there's also an emotional job to be done, especially when you're dealing with such a tricky topic as something like death, for example. So for each stakeholder, like let's say somebody is planning the death of a loved one, you've got the functional job, which is, I just want to have all my paperwork, my legal, my financials in order. How are you going to measure the success of that job being done? Minimal time spent, minimal money spent, and the outcomes that we want to avoid: unnecessary paperwork, high fees. And then you've got the emotional job. So that's being able to sleep at night, minimizing stress and anxiety. Obviously, planning the death of a loved one is going to be a pretty stressful event. And so there is a lot of emotion to consider when, for example, Willow is figuring out what services they're going to offer and even how they talk about them. They have to be sensitive to the emotional job that's being done. Obviously, with end of life planning, the emotional job is quite high. Like there's obviously a lot of emotions happening there. In the case of a website design, that may not be the case, but I still think it's really important to factor in that your client is not only looking for the website. There's more of an emotional job that needs to be done at even different stages in the process. Like how many of you have worked with a client and you've launched their project and the client goes a little crazy at launch time, right? Like whether they're stressed or imposter complexes coming up. I know I experienced that. Amy says, I found with solopreneurs, emotional job is high too. Absolutely. Especially if you've got a solopreneur who's paying you anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for a project. I mean, that's a lot of money. When's the last time anyone here spent $5,000 or $10,000 on a service provider for something, it's a lot of money to ask. And so it's so important to address the emotional job. And that's a big part of, I think, why proposals can be difficult, because people aren't just looking for that list of features, right? And that's where, that's, I think, the difficulty in that switch of moving away from talking about the features to addressing that emotional job right in the proposal. And of course, right in your website as well. So trust becomes so important there. Absolutely. People want to know that you understand what that deeper need is. So you do have to speak to that. You can't really gloss over the emotional side. And humans are emotional creatures. We make, large financial purchases and decisions based on our emotions. So we do have to be sensitive to that. Most of the clients, the emotional part is huge. There's a scary part for them, but also a deep relief they feel when they finally find someone they feel they can trust. Exactly. And that's a huge part of even what that first meeting is with a client, is feeling that you're really just, it's a trust exercise in the first meeting. It's like, are we going to work well together? Do you get me? Do you get my pains? And so, even though, again, I'm showing you an example where the emotional job is high, like you guys have said, anytime you're dealing with entrepreneurs, small businesses, emotions are high. And so I think it's really, really important to understand what the emotional job is that you're solving for any service that you're offering. So I think it would be great to do some brainstorming around this for yourselves as you think about what is the job to be done of someone, whether it's planning for a new website, what's the functional job? What's the emotional job? Here's another example, like planning your own death. Like that's another pretty intensely, highly emotional thing. So for example, in the research that Willow was doing as they were interviewing friends and family, leaving a legacy became something really important. Having a sense of closure with friends and family. So instead of merely offering wills and estate planning, they wanted to take much more of a personal development approach and really address some of these more uncomfortable but highly emotional parts of end of life planning that for the most part other people have been really uncomfortable talking about. And so this can kind of help them design services that address actually both of these needs, getting the financials in order, but doing it with grace and dignity. And then here too, another opportunity is to educate families about burial and related options. And so the functional job is actually educating the family about the burial options, but the emotional job is bringing peace to families, offering rituals, support, community, that sort of thing. So this framework it's a super simple, just easy way to kind of take a different perspective and different look at maybe the services that you're already offering. For example, someone's not just hiring you to do their SEO. The SEO is obviously to bring in more traffic. It can, maybe they have trouble building their audience. So you want to touch upon that. Any business wants to be growing, to growing their audience, to growing their income. So you do need to touch upon that sort of the deeper need that's happening beyond just like, make my website search engine friendly. And so I'll close this one. Jobs to be done. You guys can Google that. It might kind of get you thinking a little bit about that. The other exercise that, if you guys haven't done this already, how many of you have actually done a fleshed out persona, and not like a vague, like my ideal audience is 40 to 60 female and really vague, but how many of you have actually done like a really, really specific persona? Long time ago. I think it's I know Helen, in Helen's workshop, we started to do a little bit about that, but I think it's so important, especially if you're making any kind of pivot, always useful. It's just remembering to use them. Exactly. And I'll show you some personas that I did. So, in the development of Doki, our course launching platform, I had to do a bunch of research myself on the kinds of people that launch online courses, because there's a ton of different types of people that launch online courses. So I reached out to a few of you, Amy, for example, I know Amy launched selfteach.me. Chrissy, for example, also is on the platform. So I wanted to talk to people who were both considering creating an online course, maybe they'd already created one, and just did some really, really informal interviews with people, did a few surveys, started collecting some information, and started looking for some patterns so that I could identify a few key personas, and then did a journey map of those personas. I don't know if you guys have done journey maps either, but I'm going to show you both examples of a journey map and persona, which I think will help you guys get a bit more clarity. So let me share my personas with you. And I think I've shown you guys this tool before. I use Murally, but really you could do this with Post-its for sure. Let me know if you can see that okay. Okay. So essentially, after asking, I actually put together an interview guide. And once I asked a number of questions, I started to see a number of patterns. So some of you might recognize these faces. So then you plot out an axis that's going to make sense for your people. So for example, some of you might have really spiritually aware or introverted, extroverted. Like there's so many different patterns you could choose depending on the types of people that keep coming to you, like thought leaders or teachers or coaches, for example. And in my case, I noticed a lot of people were either self-taught, so they didn't have any formal teaching experience, but they're still looking to teach a course. So they're still moving into a position of leadership and teaching, but they're self-taught. I also noticed people that had certification and actual classroom experience. And then you could start to see some patterns with people who were willing to hire help. So people who are willing to hire business coaches, maybe they've taken a zillion courses, you know, they're always buying PDFs to kind of help them figure out what to do next. And then a lot of people who are action-oriented, they take action, they do it themselves, they're kind of self-starters, and they're just willing to kind of figure it out as they go. And so I plotted people along in each of these quadrants. You come up with a persona, and you really flesh it out. So for example, Amy's there. I know, I assume Amy's in her early 30s. She's married, you know, children, and what kind of behaviors. Lori just asked, what tool is this? It's Mural, mural.ly. It just makes it super easy. Did you lose the chart? Can you see it? And I can zoom in a little bit if that helps. So you can start to look at the behaviors and the patterns between different people that are going to make sense for the services that you're offering. So you might find things like they're huge podcast listeners, or they're avid readers, or they like teaching in small groups, or they're really outgoing and really community driven. And understanding some of their deeper motivations are going to be really, really important as you start thinking about the services that are going to make sense for these people. So for example, I knew that one of Chrissy's underlying motivations is to spend more time with her family. She wants to do more meaningful work, wants to be seen as a thought leader, more passive revenue streams. So knowing that that's part of her motivations, we can start to, for example, as we think about Doki's content marketing, we can start to address some of the struggles that relate to these specific motivations. And the needs as well. So, you know, fulfilling work, the need to be self-expressed, more time available for families and that sort of thing. So I would recommend that everyone at least starts with some kind of persona. I think it's great if you can kind of map out the quadrant and include at least 4 people, and then kind of hone in on who's the person you absolutely love to work with, and start really digging into some of those needs and motivations. So I took Chrissy because Chrissy actually is on the Doki platform, and I know she's releasing her course pretty soon. So I see her as sort of an ideal client. So can you guys see this new map here? So this is the customer journey. And I'll maybe focus on this so you guys can probably see that better. Can you see that okay? So starting with Chrissy as the persona, and maybe I'll zoom in just a little bit more. So the journey that I wanted to map out, and for you guys, this will be a little bit different. It might be, you know, a business coach launching their first website, or maybe it's a business coach looking to level up their website. So for me, there's sort of a step one was the decision to actually create the course. So well before even Chrissy is ready to purchase a platform, she's in a position where she's like, hey, wait a second, I want more income, I want more thought leadership, I think it's time for me to create a course. So at that stage, I can start to look at how's she feeling in this moment? What are the pain points and what are the opportunities? So you can actually do this for every single step in the client journey. So I know Chrissy's excited about the idea. I also know she's probably overwhelmed and intimidated and not sure where to start, which then can lead to opportunities. So for example, do I need to help create a beginner checklist for someone who's considering creating an online course? Blog posts to educate. Her pain points are maybe not being sure where to begin, not sure about her expertise, right? So some of that imposter complex comes up. I've seen that happen time and time again with people that are thinking about doing online courses. I'm sure some of you here have thought that yourselves, you know, am I in a position where I can teach this? And of course, just not enough time. How do I squeeze that in when I've got other clients that I'm working with? So as she starts to prepare, what are the different steps that she's going to be going through? Researching how to begin, researching what tools to use, deciding on the tools, building customer personas, the format, the outline, the draft. So of course, I know there's some excitement here and there's some serious overwhelm that's going to happen here. Pain points, maybe procrastination, not sure how to best organize the content. And again, for each stage, you can start to identify, okay, how can we simplify this process? Maybe that's an opportunity. Is there a guide to getting organized, or how to turn your ebook into a course? You know, that could lead to an opportunity. So this ends up giving, you know, myself and the platform and our content marketing opportunities to, hey, does this become a service that we offer? Does that get built into our platform? You know, and the same goes for you. If you find that your clients are always getting stuck at a specific part of the process, and I know we talked about this kind of recently, like content production, right? Like every single client gets stuck when it comes time to handing off their content. Is that an opportunity for you, right? Is there a potential to, do you need a list of recommended copywriters? You know, do you need to bring someone onto your team to be able to coordinate to get that content written? Do you need to create a content inventory for them? Content guidance, is there an ebook that you could either produce or partner with someone to produce a guide to help them produce that content? So as you start really taking a magnifying glass to the whole process of working with your client, you can really start to get nitty gritty with, oh yeah, every time I hand off the website, there's that, you know, that awkward month after where the client's asking me so many questions and they're not paying me for that time. And like, that's an opportunity then for whether it's a maintenance contract, maybe it's a really short-term maintenance contract that you offer. Maybe it's an ongoing training library. So there's lots of opportunities there. I think if you're willing to take a look at the whole journey from start to finish of what's the moment when someone actually realizes that they need a new website? Like, what is it that actually causes someone to make the decision it's time to hire a web designer? That's something to consider as well. So let me stop sharing that screen. Does that make sense? And is it something that you guys could see yourselves mapping out and giving a shot? Do you see how just going through the process of the map could actually help you identify some things that maybe you'd overlooked or hadn't really considered? I know for me, for sure, this definitely helped me because we were already building Doki before we had done any of these personas. And part of me was like, you know, kind of kicking myself for not having really done that research and that work, because we might have focused on different features first, right? We might have said, oh, this one's actually not so important. You know, we have more people that are you know, needing the mentorship or needing whatever. And so, you know, I'm kind of guilty of putting the cart before the horse as well. So it helped me not be so willy-nilly about creating content. That's another thing too, right? Once you understand what the different parts are of the journey, you can actually start to create content that specifically, not even just in a cycle, but just that kind of specifically addresses parts of that phase. So if someone's, if someone's just in the like thinking about or contemplating an online course, they're not ready for some of the more, maybe some of the podcast interviews that I've done, or the more advanced blog posts that we want to write. So we need to factor in, if we've got a content strategy, we want to make sure that we're addressing the people that are in consideration mode and are also maybe mid-production of their course, or maybe they've launched one and didn't have any success. So there's so many opportunities, not just for crafting services, but crafting content or crafting maintenance retainers that make sense based on the pains that people really do have. And Helen was saying, since it's to the same person at different points in their journey, your content will stay consistent. Love this. Yeah. And again, this journey, for example, for Chrissy is going to look different than, say, for Amy, because I know Amy created her own custom platform. So, she's not necessarily a Doki user, but she's someone that is interested in using courses, membership sites, whatever it is, to, build her authority, to build a community. So we may want to write some content around community building and that sort of thing. So you can start to write content that's not just for one persona, but once you've kind of mapped out your four personas on that grid, you can start to see where the overlaps are, and then see where some maybe unique opportunities are. So I hope that's kind of helpful as just some sort of baseline tools to get you guys started as you think about what are the pains, how do you create one from the four? So where to start? You can start doing I don't want to just like throw you guys into saying like, do a bunch of interviews with people, because I think that can be a little intimidating, but could you take a look at maybe 2 or 3 clients that you've worked with that you really like working with, and start to identify some common themes, traits, patterns between those people? Do you work a lot with coaches? Are they really extroverted? Are they thought leaders? Are they like, what are you noticing time and time again? I think, Karen, in your case, there's going to be a lot of nonprofits in there. And to start pulling, what kind of things are people asking for? So I noticed that a lot of clients coming to me were people that are building online courses, right? So if I'm doing consulting services for people that want to launch online courses, I'm trying to look at what are the things that, what are the types of courses those people are producing? Are they solo business owners too, or are they small businesses? Are they creating, is it business to business or business to consumer? And you could even look at things like high end or low end. So do the clients that you work with, do they offer really expensive high end services? Are they wanting to be more of like the affordable, friendly option, right? So you get to choose your access, but it's got to make sense for the kind of clients that you work with. So for me, again, it was like the self-taught or the experienced teacher, like people that had certification or were self-taught. Should be looking at the common threads, not so much their differences. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like if you had to map out a spectrum, like where do people fall in that spectrum? Because something for me to consider is, are people that are launching online courses willing to invest in having someone coach them through the process? So there may be people that will come to the Okie Dokie site and say, well, I can't afford your launch package, but I'd be willing to pay X amount for maybe an ebook or like a self-guided version. So are there ways then for me to package the consulting offering that we're doing into a course that people could take at a lower price point? And that way we're kind of meeting people at both ends of willingness to invest and not quite there yet, but there's still room for us to help them. So that might be one way of looking at it. It took me a while to kind of settle on these specific axes, but I felt like support seeker was a trait that I saw a lot. So people that are willing to invest in online courses, willing to invest in, for example, even in DSS, willing to get the help that they needed. And then there's the people, for example, that implement quickly, ask questions later. Are you willing to just give it a shot and do a learning launch and tweak? Or do you have the perfectionists that kind of wait forever and tweak and tweak and tweak and can't launch because they're so stressed out about the process? Well, there's an opportunity to help people with the procrastination side of it. Most of the times people procrastinate because they don't know what step to take next. So there's some opportunity there, even I think with our content marketing. So, I'm curious if you guys have some thoughts or some ideas, clients that you've already worked with where you're starting to see some meaningful commonalities that you could start to take a look at. And again, a willingness to do interviews with these people. So I was just willing to hop on the call with anyone who remotely had any question, like maybe they were thinking about using Doki and they reached out. I said, great, let's hop on a call, hop on Skype. And it was kind of a chance for me to, do some market research and see what kinds of things people are getting tripped up by. And that's been super useful. So they're so grateful that I'm doing these calls for free. And I'm actually just getting a ton of, of market research. So is there anyone that you guys would be willing to actually hop on a call with, or even reach out to someone and just say, hey, I'm thinking about, restructuring my services, and I'd love to see if this is something you'd be interested in, outline the service, hop on a call. I know that's super scary, but it never hurts to ask. I think far too often we end up kind of banging our head against the wall and crafting these offerings and spending so much time trying to package something together that we don't even necessarily know if somebody wants. So I'm all for being willing to be open to asking people. I've got another image that I found here that I think could be useful for you guys too, in terms of mapping out your different offerings. So looking at the stuff that you're already offering right now versus what would be kind of a radical new offering. What's something that you've been maybe curious about but haven't taken a plunge, and for some of you that's going to be digital strategy, right? You're kind of curious to offer it to a client, but maybe haven't felt confident enough charging for it yet. So could you actually plot out your services in this way to look at what existing offerings are actually bringing in the most revenue, right? And which are the ones that are the best use of your time? So that's something to factor in too, is kind of what are your money makers and what are you actually really enjoying working on right now? Has anyone ever done anything like this where you kind of actually map out your services with Post-its and kind of look at, again, these might actually be different people, like the kind of people that are going for existing tried and true offerings might be different than the ones that are willing to try your, radical new offering or something that feels really risky and innovative in the market. So I'll close that one there. But I do think personas and experience mapping are two of the best tools for really helping you guys start to plot out services that actually make sense for what your clients need. Let's open it up to some questions, and I'm totally open if any of you guys want to kind of hop on with me and talk through any of this stuff. I know this stuff is not easy, and I know talking about it, like talking about what you actually do is a huge challenge that I think a lot of us struggle with, especially when you're putting together a proposal to talk about your services. And again, especially on your Work With Me page, without making it seem like a big dump of all the features that you've got going on. So yeah, I'd love to know, first of all, is anyone here willing to commit to doing a persona and a journey map? Is that something you guys could see yourselves doing? And if so, I'm happy to provide a few links to kind of help make that process easier for you guys, to like give you a little bit more detail about how to actually do it and where to start, because I know it can be a little daunting. Awesome, yay. That'd be really cool. I would love to meet again in a month and kind of see everybody's maps. And there's another great tool, Extensio, I think it's called. Extensio. that has some free kind of templates as well that might help with that. And if you look up, I think if you look up persona grid, you can probably find tons of examples on Google too of just how to actually do it. Persona might be changing, so it's exciting to think about how it can help her on the journey. Yeah, that's exciting too, right? Like your persona might not stay the same. Like I think even kind of seasonally, there's room to say, hey, I noticed that I used to work with a lot of business coaches, but I'm noticing more, I'm getting people in sort of the tech world. That's kind of interesting. Their challenges are a little bit different. Like how is that going to influence the way that I even present my services to them in a proposal might be a little different, and that's okay. UX Pin has a persona grid under UX Docs. Absolutely. That's funny, Jennifer. I think I quit a few of my services to kind of make room for Murally because I use it for pretty much everything. Maybe I'll show you guys a few other ways that I use it. Stakeholder mapping is another one. This might be a little bit overkill, but for the client Willow, the question was, how can we get people to be more proactive about their end-of-life planning? So who are all the people that are sort of involved in the whole process, like any single touch point of Willow's business? Who are these people? And so I know this probably looks like a big jumbled mess, but again, you start to map out, there's people in the business sector, education, influencers. For example, Danielle Laporte is here because she's friends with them and she's a major influencer. So she's been really encouraging, and I could see her at some point possibly being willing to share the work that they've done. So that's something to be aware of is, who are the influencers whose one email or one tweet can actually really suddenly let people know about your services in a huge way. I mean, I'm sure one mention from Danielle Laporte would skyrocket their traffic. So that's just something to consider. And then you identify the motivation. So in pink, I've got, a death doula teacher. Yes, that's actually a thing. They want to educate others about the options around death and dying. They want to minimize the stress involved in the planning. If you're a business, if you're, for example, I would be their designer. Here I am here. I'm sort of their designer and business consultant. At the end of the day, business needs to make money. I also took them on as a client because I want to make a difference to communities. And I think what they're doing is really great. Community, friends and family, neighbors, they're going to have different motivations and different needs. So, the motivations of children of dying parents, they want to feel supported. They want to learn about the options. They want new insights. They want to resolve conflict around family members. So again, it's kind of similar to the journey, but it's a little bit more of a sort of brain dump. But once you start to tap into some of these motivations of the different stakeholders, you can start to look at opportunities. So for example, they may want to partner up with like funeral directors or hospices, right? So if people are going to have to go through the process of actually doing the estate planning and planning the funeral, imagine if they could refer patients to clients to someone like Willow, this organization, to help them really do some of that planning. That could be an interesting partnership there, right? So once you start to plot out all the different people that at some point could touch this question and this business, you kind of start to come up with some, okay, well, what could it look like if a therapist knew about your business and there was some kind of partnership or relationship there? What could that look like? Could we craft any stories around what's happening with what you're doing and get a journalist to write about it? So that's another way, just another way that I use Murally, which is really fun. Lots of other stuff, obviously business modeling, even like social media strategy stuff. I'll, like Instagram topics, behind the scenes, personal life, and sort of looking at your content marketing from more of an organized perspective and kind of brainstorming at the same time. So these are some of the ways that I'm using these tools to. Here's another one of like, one of the exercises we had to do was to map out your connections. So basically everybody that you know, map them into these categories of, people that help you provide balance, maybe people that are negative in your life, professional growth connections. So yeah, I love Murally. I pretty much use it for everything, any kind of like brainstorm, even like speaking and curriculum planning, and like it just really helps me kind of keep my thoughts kind of streamlined. So yeah, exactly, a giant whiteboard in your computer. It's super fun. Yeah, so I can't say enough about that tool for kind of helping think through some of that stuff. Um, and no, I don't get any. Um, I don't get any kickback for mentioning they don't have they don't have an affiliate program, but if they did, I'd be all over it. But they have all sorts of pre-made templates for you too, like the business model canvas and that sort of thing. And I mean, here's another idea. Like, this is stuff that I do with my clients. So I will help them actually map out their client personas, do SWOT analysis on their clients, and help them map out their business model. Because I think in the past, the tendency has been to design sites around, again, our personal preferences or kind of what's trendy or what's in, and oh, it's for an older audience, so like the text should be bigger. And we do make a lot of assumptions. And so as much as possible, I want to encourage my clients to not be making those assumptions. So I'll force my clients to actually go out and do those interviews with people, come back with their answers, and we can start plotting them on here. And that way we can really identify the pain points and not be working based off of assumptions. So, we took a look at who could represent the ultimate persona of the Willow offering. And so we, have this woman, household incomes over 75, have children, they value organic food. Like, they found that food was actually a really common thread between almost all of the people that they talked to. So that's kind of interesting too. Their desires, their needs, their pain points. I think the more you can get connected to some of this stuff, the easier it's going to be to start talking about what you do and why it's relevant to people. Yeah, so again, this is just sort of how I use Murally. And so, I'll share this with my client and they can jump in too, and they can be adding, changing stuff. Like, I got them to go in and highlight green any of the ones that they felt were actually more relevant, so we could focus on a few and not on every single one. Yeah, because obviously with any kind of project, there's like a million different options they could take. And I'm not going to tell them to, get their blog up and launch a course and do all of these things at once. So it's a matter of, all right, how do we prioritize based on the opportunities that we've got in front of us right now? So, this is the kind of, I think, high value work that you can, this starts to really show way beyond web design what's possible, right? Even things like collaborating on the website inspiration, they can leave comments and be like, we love the menu and navigation on this one. We love the modern feel of this one. And it's just one place to kind of see all of that in one big map, basically, which is pretty cool. Then you can start to see connections like, well, if you said that your revenue stream is going to come from here, and like this offering doesn't really make sense for what you said over here, and you can start to kind of pull some of those pieces together. So that's my Murally spiel. I love Murally. I use it all the time, and it just helps me kind of do some of these design thinking exercises. What other kinds of homework assignments do you have your client do? Coming from someone who always feels like I have to do all myself in order to offer the strategy. No, and I love that you asked that, because I actually found in Willow's case, they had done so much digging and so much research well before they came to me, like more so than any other client. And I was actually quite impressed that they had been willing to do that much work. It was quite refreshing that they had already done a number of interviews. They had already surveyed their list informally. So they came to me with a lot of information. So if anything, I kind of helped them map out and make sense of that information. So cool, knowing those things about those people, what does that mean then in terms of the services that you're going to offer and even the price points that you're going to offer? So we did a lot of brainstorming around that, but really it was their homework to go out and ask the questions, and they would show me the questions that they were asking, and I might say, oh, you might also want to ask these questions as well. It would be really good to know XYZ. Where are people already going for that information? That's always a good one. So to check in, if someone needs a web designer, where do they go? Where have your current clients actually found you? So that kind of information is always good to know. I think, Amy, to answer your question, it depends on the client and how much they already know about their business. Yeah, in the case of Willow, they're a very new company, but they had a pretty good sense of what people were talking about and what they were asking for. So yeah, you don't need to be the one that actually does all the research. But if you want to be the one that does that, like that can be something that you offer. And I talk about this in my proposals. Like our discovery process is pretty intensive for a reason, because then we know that we're making decisions that actually make sense for their clients. And so I do think a lot of the value is in how you position that research, because it's really easy to skip research, and it's really easy to be like, yeah, like if we had time for that, we would do that. But everything starts with a really good foundation. And I do think it's tempting to skip the sort of user discovery process, but that's really where all the insights come from. Laurie says, I think one of my issues is with highly localized clientele with small businesses run by 1 to 3 person staff and owner. And the concept of planning is a challenge and to propose and land. Need to move my client stream off coast so the work on who are my best clients is up first, right? Right. So Laurie, you've been working with local clients, but now you're starting to wonder, are those actually your ideal clients? Because if they don't actually value the planning. And to be fair, I will say this, I don't think every business is in a position where they should be investing in this. I've had people come to me looking for the whole shebang, and I would say, your business is so new, it doesn't really, like, I don't feel right taking that money from you. Like, it doesn't actually make sense for you to invest this much upfront when you don't even know if people are willing to pay for the services that you're thinking of offering. So that's where I might help someone. Let's validate your idea. Let's actually see if this makes sense. Let's see if there's a viable business here well before investing in a gigantic website. So that might be putting up a super simple splash page. And then again, helping them create some kind of survey, interview list. I would give them activities like, okay, I want you to make a persona, put together a jobs to be done, and I would give them some of these tools and say, great, go off and do these. And if you can get enough yeses or people willing to put their money down, great, okay, there's some interest there. What's the next step that we could take, without blowing that budget? Lori says, I agree. An example, a business here that has a 10-year-old website that hasn't been updated and they want a new one. 1K is considered a large budget. And Lori, it's entirely possible that is not your ideal client at all. Like if someone is at such a different price point, and if $1,000 is already a stretch for a business, there's a few conversations around that. But yeah, if someone came to me with a $1,000 budget, I'd be like, great, like go and put a website on Squarespace and take this DIY course and have someone just like update your logo or something. I don't need to be the one to take that project on. And how much of that company's revenue comes from their website? I mean, I've seen $1 million businesses that are unwilling to spend more than $5,000 on their website, which seems insane to me. If your business entirely depends on being online, and all of your revenue comes from your website, I mean, there really should be a percentage of your yearly revenue that is going towards not only building the website the first time, but the maintenance and ongoing. And if a business doesn't see the value in investing in that, then that's not my client, and I'm happy for them to be somebody else's headache, How do you separate all the things you do and package it up? That's an interesting question. I would say like my services are always evolving. So I'm always experimenting with how I package them. So one of the things that we offer now is you could call it product launch consulting. So if you've come to us with an idea, typically for some kind of course or a product or something like that, we would guide you through the process of like, okay, what's the next best step? To how do you validate the idea before you launch it? And then how do we provide support throughout the process of creating the product and then even marketing the product? So that's kind of one new-ish offering that we've put together. That includes some coaching, but so what I want to do, and I haven't done yet, Kayla, to answer how we're going to package it, it's sort of like what level of touch point and what budget are you working with? If you want us to kind of do it with you, it's this price point. If you kind of want to DIY it, it's this price point. If you just want the course that teaches you how to do it, and then again, the course will live on Doki. So it's sort of kind of meta that way, like a course on how to actually launch your course. But so it's kind of like productized consulting a little bit. So we're basically guiding you through those activities, or we're kind of giving you the activity and being like, have at her, go do it. This will help you get some clarity. So that's in some ways I don't really separate all the different things that I do. It's kind of like levels of implementation. So if someone wants a full web design, branding, and whatever along with that, great. It's the same package, but now we're adding implementation to it. So I'm always trying to kind of look at things as like modules and sort of productize, like how can I use the same exercises or principles or whatever from this phase, and here we're just taking something out, here we're just adding something in. So that's kind of how I've been trying to think about it. And I think I might have shown you guys my my launch. Let me open it up if you guys want to see an example of our course launching roadmap. Okay, so launching a product with Okie Dokie. So this is one of our latest agreements that we've been working on. So we talk about this discovery process. So I'm happy to share this with you guys. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit. So I talk about the importance of the discovery phase. So we look at your business model, your brand, your market, your audience, your time and your energy, so we can identify how to make decisions that resonate with your audience. I'm going to get them to go through a customer persona, journey mapping, mind mapping. Phase 2, we explore, we do some brainstorming, even looking at things like how do their natural strengths work into the thing that they want to create. So is it a video-based course? Is it, text-based? Is it whatever, depending on what makes the most sense for them. Making choices, tapping into identifying those key assumptions, go through some rapid prototypes. And again, rapid prototypes could be like sales pages or email invitations or that sort of thing. Development stage, debrief, what worked, what didn't work. Actually, that's not the most recent. I'll have to show you. I think that's not the most recent one. So let me pull up another. I'll show you how I broke down the pricing for this one, because I think it might answer your question about how you kind of package it up and separate it. So here's one example of the pricing. Can you guys see that? So it's kind of like, do you want just the launch consulting and the roadmap? Here's what it includes. Or do you want implementation? Great, everything from that. Plus we can do any of these things, branding, design, development. And after a 1-hour call, there's no way for me to know what the price of that project could be, because we just haven't gotten into the specifics of the branding or like what the scope of the branding is. So I would probably leave another hour call, or in some cases I've actually said, we'll figure out the full budget after the discovery phase. So that's something to consider as well. Let me see if I can find another example for you where I, again, like I'll just keep resaving this document and then I'll make slight adjustments to it. Okay, this one does have a bit of client name in it, but okay. I'll try and hide some of the client information here, but basically the goals of the project are, and this is what I understood from our first meeting, we want to elevate the current brand. We want greater flexibility and extensibility, simplify and streamline the tech, level up the current design, and launch an online course. That was the goal of the project. So this is where I talk a little bit about what we're going to do. We want to evolve your brand identity. And you'll notice in small type here, I say, this could involve the development of a new brand identity or be an evolution of your current identity. So because we don't really know what the full scope of, like, is he expecting a full logo redesign, or does he actually want to keep what he's got but maybe make some tweaks? We don't know that yet. I think it's too early to get into those specifics. So this is a really loose sort of estimate proposal based on our first call, but it's still meant to kind of open up dialogue. So again, I use very similar language than the other one, but I've kind of built it out in more detail. So the customer persona, the journey mapping, mind mapping, site map, IA, content inventory, because I knew this is not just a launching project, but this was like a full web design and redevelopment. So really, I'm going to need to understand what the full scope of the site structure and the content is well before we can actually agree on a price. So I actually, at this point, phase one discovery, there's still room for the budget to shift because we haven't really nailed down all of these details yet. Phase two, exploring, mood boards, rapid prototyping, concept development, brainstorming. Design phase, visual designs, brand identity elements done in this phase. Development phase, deploy, debrief. And then yeah, and so like this was like a $15,000 to $20,000 project, because again, I have no idea how many calls am I doing, how extensive is the branding design, like I have no idea how many pages we're going to be dealing with, and custom sales pages and landing pages and an online course. Like there's so much to the scope. So I actually say the full scope, cost, and timing to be agreed upon, and I sort of recommended that we would actually get more clear on that after the discovery phase. So that's kind of how I've been, oh, I didn't mean to. That's kind of how I've been packaging my stuff. Let me just check on some of the questions that came in through here. Michelle says, I've been using Excel for similar purposes to get clients to do their homework. Stepping back a bit, how do you get your clients to try new tools like Mural? I work with corporate clients. They're often stuck in the MS Office world. Good question, Michelle. I didn't have any problem getting Willow on board with Mural. They thought it was pretty fun. And I was kind of able and willing to show them in person what the tool looked like. But I would say if you know your clients and they're corporate clients and they're stuck in the MS Office world, I would just find tools that I know they're going to be willing to use. And in some cases, that might actually just be paper. That might just be like a big, whiteboard exercise with them that you could do virtually as well. I've done that before, where you've got like a whiteboard behind you and you're mapping stuff out and asking questions and that sort of thing. So I say, like, stick with what you know your clients are going to be willing to do. How much business comes from website? Not sure if there was there a question there, Lori? Like, are you asking how much of my business comes from doing websites? And then Janessa said, sorry if you've covered this already, stepping in a bit late. How do you communicate the strategy is something that a potential client needs instead of just a website? I find they sometimes think it's an extra cost that's not necessary, but I can't mentally separate strategy from web design. I know this person might not be an ideal client, but still needs to know how to communicate. Absolutely. And honestly, I think the easiest way to do that is how you talk about it on your website. It is the first filter. Absolutely, the very first filter. So when people stumble upon your site, the way you talk about what you do and the way you present what you do, how you call yourself, the language that you're using, all of those things are sending a signal that you're not just an implementer, pixel pusher. So I think really great copy that really describes the kind of work that you do is the very, very, very first step. Because then you're not really convincing someone. Someone is coming to your site and they're deciding that you're the right person based on what they're reading. So I think that would be step number one, is like really getting good at communicating what it is that you do and for who. Like the word implementation, to have the web portion be like an add-on. Yeah, like that's a great point, is the add-on is the actual implementation of the web projects and not the other way around. So, you know, I know that when people are coming to me, they're not really coming to me for web design. They know that I do web design, but it's not really, and that's because of, again, how I talk about what I do on my site, calling myself a digital strategist and not a designer, even though I am a designer. It's just like the careful choice of your words, being on podcasts where I'm talking a little bit more in depth about the kind of work that I'm doing. Everything that you do and offer and talk about all starts to send a signal. So if you don't have any web copy, or you've got a splash page, or you don't really have any signals, right? Like if you've just got a placeholder page that's not sending any signals, of course you're kind of forcing yourself to do all of the work in a client call, to be like, here's why you need this, and trying to convince people with this big document that goes into all this fluff, and they're like, why am I paying for this? I just wanted a website. So I think the more you can kind of put up those barriers a little bit beforehand, well before they actually get in touch with you. Some of that could even be with a download, like someone gets in touch with you and you say, like, great, I want to make sure that we're on the same page about the kind of work that I do. Here's an ebook, or kind of here's a guideline of my process. Let's make sure that we're a good fit before we move forward. In Design as a Job, Mike talks about how people try to take out the research part to save money, but that's not an option that his company offers. Exactly, and that's kind of something that I'm in the same boat now. Is I realize for how many years I've been even skipping the discovery process, like the real human side of the discovery and research. I think it's so easy to make assumptions. I think we all do it all the time as web designers. It's like, well, this is what I think that audience is going to want, right? Like, how many of us have actually done the digging to be like, is this color does this actually make sense for this audience? It's usually based on our personal preferences, or at least historically it has been. So I think designers are a bit guilty of being lax on the research side, and clients are too. So I feel like there's such an opportunity there to be the person that can help your client understand how to even do that research. Because like looking into your Google Analytics is one thing, and understanding metrics and numbers and one thing, but to actually be willing to do some like primary and secondary research. All of you guys have had conversations with clients. If you've all worked with clients, you've probably heard some of the same pains over and over again, and maybe not even processed it, but they're not necessarily using the same terms that you're using. And so I'm always listening for like, what's that underlying need? Or what's the like overwhelm and procrastination is something like almost every single client struggles with, right? Whether it's procrastinating on their content, or like they're just nervous about launching. There's so much there that can be an opportunity to provide more support, or provide more accountability, or adjust your services to make them less overwhelming, and that sort of thing. So yeah, so Janessa, in your case, like what signals are you sending that say that you do more than a website, right? So so much of it is in the messaging and how you describe what you do. A services page, of course. Even like a brilliant case study, like, anyone that gets in touch with you, could you send them to a link that actually outlines a really amazing case study of what you were able to do for someone that goes into the benefits well beyond the design. Gotten several inquiries, too expensive to all of them, although my pricing is not outrageous. And I think it's a miscommunication that what I offer is different. Absolutely. If someone thinks your price is too expensive, that's fair. Like it's not that you necessarily are. All that really matters is that the client is perceiving what they're getting. There's like a disconnect between the perceived value versus what they're going to be paying for. So absolutely, so much of the challenge is in how you're communicating what you do and the benefit to. So I think it's even less about how what you offer is different, and it's more about how what you offer is really solving a specific need for them, and it's really what they need. Not sure where I'm tripping up. I've heard Dan Mall throw around the idea that the client purchases strategy and gets design dev work for free, yeah, basically. Obviously, at that point, you would set your prices so that your work isn't free, but that would certainly position your services differently. I can't even get them on a call right now. So Janessa, you're having trouble hopping on a call with prospective clients? I think my problem right now is that people come to me right now because they either know I do web design or they like my visual aesthetic. So I think I need to communicate that clearly on my site, which is launching soon, and then also start sharing about value online, talking about strategy more than design. Good points. Absolutely. And all of this stuff takes time. Absolutely. I know, like Kayla and I talked a little bit about this, and hopefully Kayla's okay with me talking about this, but when you've traditionally offered lower end wham bam thank you bam services at a lower price point, and then people get to know you as that, oh yeah, she's the one that does like the cheap and cheerful websites that are really nice, but then once you're like, wait a second, I really want to be doing high value, high end work that comes at a higher price point, they're like, well, why would I pay you 10,000 when you were just going to pay me, or you were just going to charge me 1,000, for that other offering? It can be really hard to pivot. Like, it takes time to pivot. And so I know Kayla was frustrated, like, oh, I don't want to be seen that way or remembered that way. Well, it takes a while for people to remember you differently than you've been presenting yourself for months, years, potentially, right? So all of the signals need to be in place. And that's, again, your website needs to have all the signals, the way you talk about what you do, where you're found online, what conversations you're partaking in, the kind of projects that you're taking on, because so much of our projects, I think, come from referrals, right? So it's so important that every project that you take on has the potential to lead to more projects that you want. Yeah, maternity leave is kind of a whole different ball game there. Yeah, and you don't want to take on the wrong projects just for the money. Can't get clients on a call, then I think they're the wrong client. And so I'm curious why you can't get them on a call, or like what's the process, Kayla or Janessa, that someone goes through to inquire about your services? Is it kind of word of mouth? Someone knows what you do and they're kind of emailing you to get in touch, or like what's the process for taking the next step with your clients? Yes, once you've got a site, yeah. And I know, who was it in the Kelly, I think it was, that had a placeholder site for so long, and she was like, I don't know why clients aren't banging down the door, and I was like, what? Well, your website doesn't really say what you do. Like, it doesn't. It's still a placeholder website, and as soon as she launched her site, it was just like the floodgates had opened, and she's like, I didn't even realize that I was totally blocking myself on that one. But of course, your website's going to be the biggest tool that you have to communicate in advance what you do. They tell you their budget. It's not even close to what my range is for a project. They don't want to waste my time because they don't have the budget. Right now, it's been getting referrals. Yeah. Yeah. Site is huge. So most of the time, people are coming to you with a pretty set budget. I'm curious, Janessa, do you ever are you ever able to tailor what you can do to the budget that they come back to? Can you say like, oh, well, that's nice. I can only do like ABC for you, at that price point, and kind of let people know what's possible. Photo shoot got pushed back. Oh, for your site? Oh, bummer. That sucks. Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful, if it's answering your questions. I know there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's not necessarily one specific problem or answer. 2,500 for a Squarespace site is too expensive, then it has me worried, and I don't want to take on a project where 1,000 is their budget. Yeah, and that those don't necessarily need to be your people. If I'm going to take out, absolutely, yeah. If you're taking time out of being mom, it's got to be worth your time for sure. And I mean, I've had this conversation too with Evan recently, as we're talking about raising your prices and finding that sweet spot. I do think it's really, really, really hard to compete on just design. So if someone wants a web design done and they're looking at you and another designer who at some point, like, they can't discern the difference in the design, like your design might be way, way, way better, but like the client doesn't necessarily understand the nuance, and this designer is charging half the price, and that if that's all people have to compare is just designer A, designer B, I guess I'll go with the cheaper one. It's really hard to compete on design alone. So when moving in a new direction, more brand strategy versus web design only, would you suggest focusing on one MVP offer at first, or having 2 or 3 different tiers of that service? That's a good question. I mean, pricing tiers are pretty effective for sure. So yeah, that's a really great question. I think it depends on the offering. I do think pricing tiers can be really effective because people are able to kind of self-select and be like, oh, well, that one's really expensive. I don't know if I need that. And I think ideally the middle option is usually the one that you want people to choose, or it's supposed to be sort of the best, bang for your buck. So that can provide a bit of, price anchoring for people. Any exercises or tools on how to map out what your services look like? Yeah, I think I'm gonna send you guys a link to a little map. It's similar to that one image that I had online, where you end up plotting the post-it notes as like, this one would be a high-end service, but maybe low income. And you actually start to kind of plot, like, where do these things make sense in the spectrum? And you can start to look at, I know that people are willing to pay for this one. I don't enjoy this one, so maybe I'll put this to the bottom of the pile. And you can start to kind of map out where things would fit. And even starting with like your revenue goals, right? Like, how much do you want to earn in, say, a year or a quarter? And doing a little bit of a work back. So if you're only charging $5,000 for a website, and you want to make X dollars, how many of those would you need to actually take on to make it worthwhile? And then where are those little gaps and opportunities for supplementing that income? Or again, if you added one maintenance retainer per quarter at X number, like, what could that look like? And to start really planning your services a little more around your revenue goals. And I think I know in the DSS content, there's that spreadsheet I shared with you guys of like, it's like a list of all the different services I offer, even things like the retreat, right? And it's like, if I run that once a year, it's this price. And if I do X number of websites and X number of launch things and this many customers, and you start to plot it out and look at even how much of my energy does that take up versus the income coming in. Does it make sense to take on another web design client, or is it better to do a consulting offering? And you can start to get a little smarter around, maybe that's not the best use of my time right now. So yeah, I feel like we should design an exercise around this. Yeah, it sounds like everybody's kind of in the same boat with that. Maybe we could find a way to like connect the revenue planning to the specific services and really map it out properly. Yeah, having a baby, Janessa, I know it kind of changes the game, and I think there's no real way around that. Like, I think it's quite normal and natural that like this phase is going to be slower for you, and it's going to be it's going to be tougher financially and even energy wise. And so you're going to have to be a little forgiving with yourself while you're doing stuff with baby. Yeah. And so again, for you, Janessa, you're going to have to take on stuff that makes sense for your energy, and not taking on stuff that's just going to make you resentful, right? I know Helen can relate. I know Amy Haywood can relate as well. Did a huge strategy project, and that was too much. So I'd love to flesh out too much in terms of the price, Kayla, or like it just took too much out of you, or and I mean, that would be really interesting to look at too, Kayla, to look at how much of the strategy you handled versus how much of it the client could be handling. Like, can you be guiding them and you're creating the insights, but they're doing a lot of that work, right? So yeah, maybe you and I could chat a little bit more about what kind of work you did, what you took on, what the results were, and to find out, is this something that my client could have helped with, right? Oh, that's awesome, Amy. You're in the same boat. Yeah, and that's kind of where I feel like there's a lot of interesting room to kind of productize the way that you work. So again, with say the launch consulting, it's like, cool. Do you want us to do it with you or do it for you? Like, that's at a way higher price point. Want to DIY it and just get some of the tools and techniques to move forward? Great. Like, that's at a much lower price point, and it's sort of like a semi-guided offering, or heck, take the course and just kind of do it on your own. So I think there's maybe a little bit of room there to massage your offerings in a way that you're not necessarily becoming like a research fiend and doing all of the work yourself. And maybe to like to automate those processes a little bit, whether there's some monthly reporting that you do to kind of, because I'm not sure what the full scope of what your project was in your case, but yeah, I'd be happy to chat more about that, because that would be kind of interesting. And yeah, hopefully you're charging accordingly, or at least in the future. Obviously that would have been a good learning experience to know, like, how much time does one of those projects actually take. And then how can you revise in the future to make it worth it for you? She did nothing. Oh, that's the worst, when you make the recommendations and they don't do anything. And if there's anything I've learned too from the strategy documents, like, I used to make them huge and beastly and kind of just way too much information. And I think that can be pretty overwhelming for the client too. Like, they're just they're like, holy crap, that's a lot of, I don't even know where to start with that. So I actually I start to think of the strategy more as like an ongoing thing now. And maybe you actually have monthly recommendations. And I think this is another way to actually get people to commit to the, absolutely, you probably suffocated her. I'm guilty of it too. I still do it with every client that I work with. It's like, sorry for the fire hose of information. So I think kind of approaching it potentially like a monthly retainer, and less like a pay me X giant, number of dollars for strategy, when the client doesn't even know what strategy is or does. Like, a lot of the times a client doesn't really know, what does digital strategy entail? Like, what are you going to do for me? And like, what is the end result of that? And so I do think a lot of our challenge is around, how do we communicate it? How do we walk them through it? And how do we make sure that we're making like digestible recommendations, even if it's like one thing that they need to do every month, like one simple task or a simple change, or one thing you can help them with every month is like, okay, this month let's focus on tweaking some of your SEO, or let's do some keyword research or something like that. Next month we'll look at your list building strategy, and like really keep it simple, focused, results driven. So if you can get her some results with some SEO, and like, again, the techniques are going to be different depending on each client, but if you're helping someone build their list one month and kind of doing some sort of focused, like helping them design an opt-in and doing some work around that, can those results then speak for themselves? And you're saying, great, like, look at the results that we got from that month. Next month, I'm suggesting that we focus on this. So what I'll do is, like, I'll outline for almost an entire year, like, I think in the fall, this should be your focus. Once this is done, you're going to be blogging. Once that's done, you should move on to here. How do you price out something that takes that long? I basically come up with a price every month, and I would say like, and again, I don't like to charge hourly, but it's sort of like, how much time could I set aside for the client each month? Is it like a few hours a month even? Like it really depends on, again, client's budget. In Willow's case, like they're a brand new business. I know they don't have a huge budget. So could I come up with something like a $500 a month offering that would include a few focused hours where we're going to focus on one specific thing? So, I mean, I love the retainer model. I think it makes it easier for the client to budget for. It's easy for me for budgeting. And I just say, here's what we can expect loosely over the next couple of months. And then if something pops up, for example, if they're like, well, we know that we're going to be slow in the summer and we'd like to pick back up in September, I can start to move things around and say like, okay, maybe we actually go a higher price point and we focus on this for September or something like that. So honestly, there is no set answer to the pricing question. Like it takes some experimentation, but I think I am almost always willing to work around the client's budget. And so I'm like, what can you afford? Great. Sounds like you need like an hour of reporting every month, or let's hop on a call every month and just make sure that your head is on straight and you're not overwhelmed. So even just providing that kind of guidance of just helping someone not feel overwhelmed by all of the information they're being exposed to can be a huge value add. So it's hard when the client doesn't really want to act or can't put it into their current workflow. You want to prod them to do stuff because it would work for them. Absolutely, but also, I mean, the client has to be invested in their success, and yeah, if they're not, there's not a whole lot you can do for them. Part of that might be in the communication of how that will actually help them, because if they're not doing it, I suspect it might be either they're too busy or they actually just don't think it's going to get them the kind of results for the effort that they're putting in. Sorry. Sorry, just reading the questions here. I think that time commitment isn't something that interests me, but I can try to figure out something that's faster but doesn't overwhelm. I mean, sometimes it can be so simple as looking at their site and being like, man, your navigation is actually a little bit confusing. You've got a couple pages that don't really make sense tucked away. There's no call to action on this page, like kind of a UI audit of sorts. Like even something so simple as improving one small piece of their UI could make a huge, huge difference. So it doesn't always have to be so technical. Like there are design things you could do every month. There's UI stuff. There's a lot of opportunity, I think. I feel like they'll never get into implementation design phase. Well, again, like I see that as being ongoing. So there's design that you could be doing every month that is specifically helping. Like you might be making a recommendation based on there's no calls to action on this page. It feels really dry. Like, what if we improve this page and maybe added a graphic here and like a more compelling call to action? That could be something you could implement easily. Whether it's like designing a little icon of their book and that sort of thing. So I feel like there's some room there to innovate, to kind of still make it worth your while and fun and the kind of stuff that you want to do. Absolutely, Kayla. I'd be happy to chat more about that stuff. Pricing out ongoing work. That's what I've done for my client. They could only afford $250 a month. So I do what I can for what we've agreed and for what I consider a reasonable amount of time and tell her what I'm going to do so we can work on her priorities. Yeah, I think, if you're doing retainer work, it's important to be really clear about the stuff that you are, here's what we're doing each month. Here's what you can expect from me. Here are your priorities, and you're really laying it out for people. Say it's a full redesign. If a strategy informs the design, then I feel like it needs to be done before. I guess I just need to find the sweet spot of designing. Yes. This is definitely a tough one, especially if you don't handle the development side of stuff. I would say, Janessa, it's not a non-structured process. It's just differently structured. And so I used to actually think this too. I was like, oh no, the way I work is so chaotic, because it's like always this rapid iteration. Um, and I do think it's probably harder as a non-dev person to, you'd almost have to find a dev that would be willing to work with you in that capacity, which can be a little tricky for sure. Um, Maybe it's not necessarily like designing as you go along, but it's designing in phases and designing in pieces. Um, and again, like every project is a little different, but I don't think this strategy ever has like a start and finish. Like I do think a lot of that work is done up front, but so much of it continues to happen as you go, and as you get people accessing the website and you're like, oh wait, that is confusing. Now that we're actually having people access that page, we notice they're not clicking here, and so what can we do to make that more obvious? So of course there's going to be some of that ongoing iteration. I think to expect to design a really fleshed out, perfectly, pixel perfect design that then gets coded and you're like, cool, there's going to be no problems, absolutely, we're good to go. It's kind of naive. Like it's without including the user in that process. And so I think inevitably you're going to run into things where um, the user's confused, or things that you didn't know were going to come up. Inevitably, that's going to happen, right? So, I mean, that happens on every single project I work on. There's always some kind of, oh, like we thought that would be really obvious, but once you actually watch people using it, or hear the questions that they're asking after launch, um, there's always kind of a process of going back and making sure that it's everything feels complete. Yeah, and it's tough because again, like I don't ever hand off a final design to someone to code, and so I feel like that process is inherently going to be a little different. So I'm not totally sure what the best way to prototype is if you're only handling the design side of things. So maybe that's something worth. You should talk to is even Christine Thatcher. And I think she's got a course that she's running on this too. So um, on the sort of actual web design process. So she might be good to chat with about that. Yeah. I wish I could be more useful there. I know it's a little different when you handle the dev side of things on your own, or if like I'm able to go in and tinker with the things that I want to change, right? I know it's kind of different. Um, any other questions that popped up, or you guys still have or want to chat about? I feel like I've been blabbing a while. Hopefully hopefully there's some useful points that have come out of this for you guys. It sounds like there's some room to do some exercises around this too, like the revenue planning and services design stuff. So that's something I'm going to think about and follow up with you guys, because I think this is obviously a pretty popular topic that a lot of people are kind of either struggling with or having some challenges around. And again, I do think the proposal side of things too, your web copy and your proposals are a big part of how you communicate that value. So I want to try and make that a little easier for you guys and get really specific about some service ideas that you could actually take on. Oh, a role playing session, that would be really fun. So almost like if a client, like a client meeting, and sort of running through like almost like a mock first meeting. Yeah, I think that would actually be really useful. Yeah, and proposals. I know. So Evan, we didn't really get too much into proposals in this one, and Evan sent me an example of her proposal, which I gave her some feedback on, and I kind of think that could even be a whole topic of its own. Is like, let's say you figured out your services, how do you actually communicate those in a proposal, and even in your website copy? Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, because I do think that's a consistent challenge for people not to go into the Chinese menu kind of like line item type thing. That's a great point. Role playing would help with handling objections. Yeah. So to even like to have some go-to scripts to go to when someone says, yeah, well, it's a bit expensive for me, and kind of how do you respond to that? Yeah, I think that would be a really great idea. Let me think on that. Would you see it as like, would you want to play the client, or yeah, that's interesting. These are great ideas, you guys. Role playing was your worst nightmare in high school. Hate being on the spot. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Acting class gives me hives too, Janessa. Oh, that would be interesting, Karen, if you wanted to play your client, and I'm the one on the call. It's tricky too, because not everyone that you're taking the call with is going to be your ideal client. So I mean, if you were behaving like your worst client ever, I might have stopped you at the point of the first email and been like, I don't think we're a good fit. But I'm totally open to trying that out, trying that process out, and seeing if it's useful. So I have no problem with that. Does anyone want to like jump on the screen and chat or brainstorm? Yeah, I do think that would be a good exercise at the retreat. Actually doing some and not even just that first call too, but like even the first kickoff call, right? Like just making the most of that first, like setting the project up on the right foot and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I know the Willow project too is open for you guys to listen to, and there's some recorded meetings in there as well. But yeah, proposal presentation I think is clearly a key struggle. Yeah, I don't know if we should chat about. Evan sent me her example, and we had a really great discussion about it actually. And I think it's project-1, so digitalstrategyschool.com/project-1. But yeah, I actually haven't linked that to that from anywhere within the site, so I can do that as well. Yeah, you guys can see some interesting conversations behind the scenes about presenting style tiles or design ideas. Yeah, that's interesting too. I know, like Evan and I talked about how much to talk about in that first meeting, like how long is that first meeting, how much information you're giving away versus asking for, and that sort of thing. So onboarding, offboarding. Yeah, there's so much room too, again, depending on your communication style, the way you operate, the kind of projects that you work on. Like again, I know Evan and I were talking about, like I'm very touchy feely in the way that I interact with clients, and that's kind of I don't even know how to be any other way. So it's like we're best buds, like right away. That's what I need from my clients too. Like I need them to be excited about working with me too. Like, I think a lot of us in this group might be a little bit like that, and like Ben is all business and super professional. But so yeah, I think everyone's process is going to reflect the way that I work, and I know that because I think about my client's project so much, like when I'm in the shower, like when I'm working on a client's project, it's always kind of in my head. So I'm always kind of thinking of new ideas as we go. Yeah, like have you ever I've jumped out of bed before, but like, oh, I do not want to forget this thing, and I'll add something into my phone. That's a lot of you. Yeah, when you're driving, like it's not just the hours that you're sitting at the computer that you're often thinking about your client. And so inevitably, my process, your process, like we're all kind of going to be a little different in the way that we make our client feel important throughout the process. And that's an unfair advantage, right? Like I know a lot of you here will have that too, but my unfair advantage is my likability with the client and my willingness to just be like so excited about their idea. Like my passion about their idea, I know that's infectious. So that's an unfair advantage I have that has nothing to do with design or development or strategy for that matter, right? So um, gestation time, how it's told. Yeah, absolutely. We don't factor in gestation time, let alone project management time or checking emails or thinking about how you're going to reply to something. Like all of that stuff we kind of forget to. And Jennifer, if you have not yet read Dan Mall's um, pricing design, it's like $6, best $6 you'll ever spend. Go read it. Oh, yes, definitely read it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can write it. You can write an entire website in one day, but it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get there. Exactly. And same with website design, right? Like how long it actually takes you to get the right, like for it to click, it takes a while. So yeah, I don't know how we got on this topic, but all that's to say that I think it's everyone's process is going to be a little different. The exercises that you think are going to be important to make your client go through are going to be a little bit different depending on the way that you work. And I know my process is extremely collaborative. Like I think it would probably make a lot of people crazy. Um, but I honestly feel like projects go so much better once I removed my ego from the projects and just said, like, together we're going to work on the thing that makes so much sense for you. And even if it's not my aesthetic preferences or whatever, if it's connecting for the clients and it makes sense for the client and they love the process, sometimes stuff doesn't make it to the portfolio, but the client is super happy and they've got amazing traffic and everyone's happy. So yeah, all that's to say is there's no specific way I think to work with people, whether it's again passing off designs, having the developer do it, and offering some post-launch support and that sort of thing. Obviously, it's going to be a bit different if you handle design or dev or content, or if you're collaborating with other people. All of that stuff is going to look a little different. Yeah. Baby woke up. Well, I'm glad you could make it, Janessa. It's really nice to see you guys. If you have any other questions, post them in. Otherwise, yeah, it sounds like we might have to have another follow-up kind of mapping session and some more exercises around this stuff because yeah, these are good questions and they're kind of getting my gears turning. So don't ever hesitate to follow up by email if you guys have any questions about any of the stuff we talked about and want to dive in deeper. It's been really good to see you guys. Thanks for popping on. Really appreciate you guys. Feel free to watch the replay anytime. And what I'll do is I'll update the link in this crowdcast. Maybe I'll link it to a page on the DSS site with kind of a list of the exercises and sort of examples that I gave you guys. And then you can hopefully be motivated enough to go and journey map your way to success. Awesome, guys. Bye for now.